Alrighty, so for week 10, I wanted to show you what I think we'll get to at the end of week 10. If not, it'll be week 11. This is at least the final CRUD operations done for the mileage and trip cost. So if I enter like 300, let's say I use 5 gallons. And I do have to fix a couple things, but I'll get there. When I hit submit, it dynamically creates a table. I'll go ahead and enter a couple more just to have it in there, just so you can see. So then what we can do here is we have edit and delete buttons, so they both work. So if you hit delete, it deletes that entry. And if you hit edit, a couple things happen. When you hit edit, it brings the values into the form, and then it disables the edit button so that you can no longer hit edit again. You can though hit delete, and I've been thinking about disabling that one as well. But let's say I enter more data, and let's say I use a lot more gallons. And when I hit submit, it then updates that. Okay, so these are the complete create by entering the data, reading it back. And the other thing it does, and this is what I will show you right now, is when you refresh the page, okay, if you don't believe me, I'll just show you. I'll close the tab and I'll reopen it, that it does actually remember the data. And in this case, remember means store it in local storage, which I'll show you how to do. So that's our goal for having your complete CRUD operations. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so in Canvas, I have the instruction for you, but matter of fact, let me just pause for a minute and get set up. Okay, so for this first item in week 10, we're going to create a table with code. All right, so take the 020 refactoring arrays and create a new folder, 21 creating table with code. And I will tell you, if you want, I have pushed my code for the 20. If you want to just grab that code to start clean, you're welcome to do that. One thing I did do, I'll show you here, is on that 20, I went through and I gave comments for what the code is doing, and that I hope you find helpful. But again, if you want to use your own, just know that it could be a little confusing if the code is different. So it might be easier. So here's my 21 here, and here's my main.js, and have your README file that has week 10 creating table with code and the main.js. Okay, so there's a couple things I just want to clear up that I realized I did not explain well. For one thing is here on the form validation. Let me go ahead and fire up the 21. Okay, drop into here, drop into code real quick. Okay, hit main. So, and we could either look at it of course, in the editor or in VS Code, but you probably know that I really prefer looking at things in VS Code because I can do a little more, hopefully better job of explaining things by actually seeing them run. So here on the is form valid, last time I talked about returning false here, and I talked about this being a truthy or a falsy value. And that's not right. When you return a true or a false, that's just using a Boolean as a Boolean. Remember, a Boolean is either true, or it's false. It's a primitive value in JavaScript, and it's either true or false. And so when I say, after running the function, passing in the values, when it gets returned, and I say is valid, that's not a truthy value or a falsy value. And let's talk about just for a second what those things are. So in JavaScript, of course, there are booleans, right? When we encounter, like I said, a true or a false, but there are some values that actually are truthy, right? Like undefined, null, and it shows them here, not a number. So if I said if undefined, right, that would be Okay, so let's actually just see this in action because I think seeing it in action, and here's how we're going to change the code. So I'm going to take off this right here. Okay. So when we hit this, if the error message means we have an error, it's greater than 1, right? Then we update the form to show that. But we're not actually explicitly returning anything. And on a function, when we're not returning something, and in this case, if we're saying there's a variable that's going to get declared, right? That is actually going to be undefined. And in that case, that is a truthy value or a falsy value. Okay, so undefined, right? If we looked in here, right? Okay, these are, so they would be falsy. All values are truthy unless they're defined as falsy. I know that can be confusing and it's like, what does that mean? And that's why I just like to show things. So now that I've updated this code, let's actually break right here, give it some invalid input, right? 0. Actually, let's do 0, 0. We know we'll throw it, right? So we know this is going to hit here, right? So now we're going to say, all right, so go ahead and update the page, right? And now when you return, right, you're returning because every function returns to whatever called it. And so when I hit step, now it returns to here, and is valid is undefined. Okay, so if it's undefined, which is in this case is what, right, it's a false, it's false, it's not defined, then it's going to not run this code. And that's where you're using a value as a truthy or a falsy value. Okay, so just know that this is a thing in JavaScript. We see it all the time, and understanding it at least at the beginning, right, to have some context around that. Okay, so study that a little more. I think it's worth studying, and you could just do truthy, falsy values. Oh, like MDN. I didn't even go look at it. So it talks about, right, if so read through this to get a better idea. Okay, so now let's do one other refactor. One of the things I told you about last week when I did the whole consulting with chat gpt and started thinking about the way I'm writing functions and saying, always write an arrow function is not necessarily true. And so I got from that conversation, which you might wonder, should we trust chat gdp? And I talked about, right, where the domain of that is that it's 2021, and even my current research showed that it's really actually true that more commonly. And so I think what I'm going to do here is, just as I talk about it, just rewrite these. I'm going to rewrite, and I recommend this, rewrite all my functions to just be a regular function. Okay, so, and the reason is that, oh, actually here, I still need that. And the reason is that it's more common. Okay, get rid of this. I actually can get rid of the whole thing there. That's all I need to do. Okay, so for all of the functions, right, go through and do that. Okay, so I'll do another one, and then you can do it on your own, right? So you could just, and so like I said, I using arrow functions is great, and when you're using a single line, they're probably fine. But for everything, it's not generally accepted. The best practice seems to be to actually just use function. And you can tell me, right? Matter of fact, in the comments, what you can tell me is, does this syntax for writing a function, is it cleaner to you? And some people think the arrow function is. Now, you don't have to do this for what we're doing in this section. I'm just going to show you that from now on, that's what I'm going to do. And I was talking to Zach the other day about how things do change, right? And when you're writing code, especially if you're writing it professionally, which by the way, I'm going to stop here because you should always, once you run it, once you update, make sure everything still runs. Okay. Make sure you don't get that. Good. Nothing wrong here. Okay. Cool. All right. Cool. So let me just to complete that thought is that when you're writing code for like professionally, you'll always have to write to their style guide. And so what we've done here is kind of just now change the style guide a little bit. Okay. Alrighty. So now let's talk about now that we have that, let's get into how to create tables. So let's just look at tables real quick in the MDN and do this on your own as well. I always recommend looking throughout these things, especially these MDM references. All I searched for was HTML table basics. So here's a table, right? You've all seen them. You've seen them many times. It's tabular data. So when we think about our app, it kind of makes sense to present it back to the user in a tabular way. And it would really be helpful to present not only the data that they gave us, but also some more data like the miles per gallon, the cost, right? And then we want to give them an edit button. So, an edit delete button. So one thing about tables though, and this is like you should not use, is that we don't use tables for layout any longer. We used to way back in the day when I was a young kid walking 20 miles in the snow. No, just kidding. I kind of did, but all right, that's a different topic. Is that we did use it for tables and we no longer do that, right? So in this case, and I want to just show you this in code, right? So we have a table and then we have a row and then we have an entry within the row, so a cell. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over just to show you in the HTML. Okay. We have a couple things here. So I'm going to add, right? I'm going to add a table reference. And in that table, okay, what do I want? I want actually a row. And in that row, I want a heading, okay, because a tabular data, typically you have a heading. And then let's just say for kicks, I think it's 5 or 6 we're going to ultimately end up needing. Now, what I'm writing here is Emmet. And if I hit tab, what it does is it creates that output for me. And now I'm just going to quickly edit this and I'm going to hit headings here just so you can see what this looks like. And for me, it was Alt Command. I'm on the Mac keyboard. You can figure out what that multi-line selection is on yours. Mine's Mac Alt, and then I go and just select the lines, and then I hit Escape to get out of it. So in this case, I said hit create a row, so I can go over to my output and look at, okay, well, here's my heading, right? And then I'm going to come down here, and I could have done this all in one line, but I'm not going to, because now these are the columns, but they are THs, which means headings. So now let's do another TR, but in there, let's do a TD, which is your normal. And let's do 6 of those, right? 6 of those. Again, I'm just going to do row here. Okay, cool. So you can see the row and the heading. And now just to make this a little clearer, let's go over to our CSS, right? And let's say table and T, H, and TD. Okay, so any of those, let's do border, right? And let's say 1 pixel, solid, and let's say blue just for kicks, right? So let's see, okay, that looks a little better. And then let's adding padding of about 8 pixels. Now, if you're going to say, Rio, I don't have any CSS, that's okay. By the way, the more JavaScript you write, the better you understand HTML and CSS, the better. And there is a HTML and CSS class starting next. Actually, at this point, it's already started at the week you're in, which is 10, because it started in week 9. Okay, so you get the idea here, right? So we have row, we have table, right? And now we're not going to, right? So this is hard coding it into the HTML. And this is just, I only showed you this to get you used to the syntax of writing, of seeing what these look like. So we have a table, right? So if we rolled that up, everything's within this table. And so what we're going to do is write code that actually creates this output instead of doing it this way, because this way doesn't make sense. It's not flexible. It's actually hard coded into the HTML. Therefore, there's no flexibility. Now, you can update these items in the HTML. You can, right? But as somebody who's learning JavaScript, we're going to teach you to dynamically create this this output. And this will be based on the number of, right? So again, at this point, I don't change anything about the program itself because I still want to see it run. And you can see exactly where this is. And by the way, if you right click and hit inspect, right, you can see what got, this is the rendered, right, DOM that is here. And you can see the padding. And again, the more you use DevTools, the easier this stuff will become. Okay, let me see how long. Maybe we'll pause here. Yeah, it's a good pausing point. So let's do this. Do a commit. I'll have a commit message here for you to commit, and then we'll continue with the next one.